Hi guys, welcome back. So this is part 2 of our interview with the Brotherhood Games boys. And we're going to be talking more about the studio and about Beautiful Desolation itself this time. So let's just jump right in. The first question I have for you now is, what was it that inspired you to start your own studio?
Well, I mean, Chris and I have been, we've been making games together for a really long time. Nothing professional, but we've been sort of collaborating on various projects since the mid-90s or so. Even and before that, when we were little kids, we used to make board games. So
that's cute.
Yeah, we've always had the game sort of thing in our DNA. Both our folks are, obviously we're brothers, and both our parents are in the technical arts, architect, fine artists, that sort of thing. So they've always encouraged us to kind of bridge the technical and the artistic side. And then Chris and I, in our early 20s, started a commercial art company, producing art for clients, and we built that into a fairly large business. So we worked really well together. And and then what happened was Chris at one point decided to, in his spare time, actually make a video game, and he made Stasis. Then we decided that Stasis was successful enough that we could then actually focus on that on a full-time basis. So we closed that other business, and we've been making video games together ever since.
That's awesome. That's really nice. Do you both do the art, or do you kind of separate into different roles with what you do?
Nick does all the programming. Programming is all big Latin to me. Like I watch him do it, and I'm like, I have no idea what's actually going on. And then I do all the arts and the animation and that sort of thing. It's very much a similar relationship to what we had when we ran our studio. It was an architectural art studio, and I did the art, and Nick sort of ran the business side and did a lot of software development for us to actually do the tools together we needed to actually run the company. And we just sort of like kind of kept up that working dynamic between the two of us.
So how big is the studio? Is it just you two, or do you have like a big team with you? Kind of tell us how the studio kind of is on a day-to-day.
So we decided to just keep it really small, and so it's just Chris and myself. And then we have my wife does the admin side of things. We recently, about a year and a half or so ago, we roped my dad, who pretty much retired, into doing 3D modeling for us, because he's an architect with 40 years of experience, and he's got 40 years of CAD experience. So he's really good on the technical side, and it's really good for our games, which tend to be very environmental. Yeah. So he's lending all of his expertise. So we have a real architect working on the project, and it definitely gives our stuff an edge that if we're not just hiring an artist who's thinking, we actually have someone who thinks about and argues with us and saying this bridge would never support people running up it. So good. Make sure it actually works for us. So it's a truly tiny little family operation. And then we do a lot of outsourcing. So if we need any specialists to do anything, we just find the best people that we can find and afford, and they then fulfill that specific role. So whatever is required, we outsource. Yeah.
And I love that. I didn't know it was such a family unit. I knew it was you two, but to have your wife and your dad that's lovely. That's such a nice. I love your company. I think that's wonderful. That's really nice.
If we get more people on, we have to change the name.
Yeah.
We've got the logo done already, so
Yeah, that makes sense. Total sense. Okay, so here's a challenge for you. If you had to describe Beautiful Desolation to someone who had never heard of it, don't know what it is, obviously they know it's a game, but they don't know anything else about it, and you only had 30 seconds to do so, what would you say?
Yeah, counter.
I am going to start the counter.
Beautiful Desolation, it's a modern take on a classic adventure game. We set it in a post-apocalyptic Africa, but essentially it's a story about brothers who are trying to overcome an adversity. Unlike a lot of sort of linear games, we wanted to make a game where the actions that you take actually influence the outcome of the world. And I think that's one of the sort of special sort of little nuggets of information about Beautiful Desolation. Yeah, but it's a post-apocalyptic adventure game.
I was sure you were going to go over, but no, that was good. Well done. Obviously, you mentioned the story in your 30-second countdown of Beautiful Desolation. We'll elaborate a bit on that now. So it's quite a roller coaster, the story. It's very emotional, very engaging, and without spoiling it too much, can you give them kind of a hint on what the adventure is in a bit more, with a little bit more elaboration than what you went into in the 30 seconds?
Sure. Well, the story takes place in kind of an alternate timeline where in the late 1970s in South Africa, an impossibly shaped object called the Penrose appears hovering over Cape Town. And this sets off a series of events with our main protagonist, Mark Leslie, who has a tragic event, I'll say without giving any spoilers, that's linked to the arrival of this construct in South Africa. And then several years later, he sort of ropes his brother, Don, into exploring this construct, and they get catapulted into the far distant future with their mechanical robot companion called Pooch. And the future is a future where robots have essentially enslaved parts of humanity. And the story involves them trying to get back home.
I think, obviously, Untold Tales are very big on stories. That's what we're all about. And I think that's something that we loved as a team in Beautiful Desolation, is that the story is just so unique. Yeah, it involves things that, the archetype of the bad robot, right? And that fear that we have, because it is an innate fear that we have that technology is going to run away with it. But the way that the story is told is so unique that it feels like something completely fresh.
We tried to ground the science fiction in sort of a possible future. So we didn't sort of we didn't go off on a crazy tangent. We kind of said, if we introduced a little bit of the politics of South Africa into it, where everyone knows the story about the apartheid government, and it was a fascist government, and we sort of said, well, wouldn't it be interesting if that government had access to developing robots, and they would imbue
artificial intelligence,
they would imbue their beliefs into that artificial intelligence, and what would happen? So we sort of took a realistic look at that, which I think is more interesting than sort of just evil robots.
No, it definitely is, because you covered it there when you said their influence on the robots, because in most fictions that we get, think of iRobot, for example, it's always the general people, just like tech companies in general. It's not like they have a malicious intent when they create these things. They're created to help humanity most of the time, right? Whether it's factory or cleaning people's houses, that's what they're created to be, slaves essentially. So putting that into that climate and that context and all of the connotations from the history alone is interesting, right? It's that part of it is very interesting. But then when you put in the idea of the influence on the AI, that isn't looked at very often. I can't think of another one that's looked at. So it's really cool to have that kind of aspect coming into it. I think that's very different and exciting. So where did the first idea for Beautiful Desolation come from?
So I would say the nugget of that idea of a post-apocalyptic Africa has been something that Chris and I have spoken about, for a long time. I think Neil Blomkamp, obviously South African, who did District 9, opened up our eyes to the possibility of telling stories that are set in South Africa that are not necessarily your traditional stories that you would expect, So he sort of took aliens coming to Earth and it turned it into something different. So we never knew how we wanted to tell the story, but we knew that this was a world that we want to tell a story in.
And then I think, I developed Stasis for a very long time. And then on Stasis went and we did Kane. And we were sort of in this kind of like horror internal mindset. And then I think when we were sort of talking about our next project, I didn't want to do another thing where it's sort of set in small little corridors and self-contained areas. So the idea of moving to something that was outdoors was definitely something that was appealing. And then we kind of took this idea of this post-apocalyptic world that we had and sort of smushed it into the idea of doing an adventure game set in this world. And it really sort of all started to come together very, very quickly.
And, you know, story-wise, we decided we wanted to tell a story about brothers.
Yeah.
I wonder why.
It's just obviously like what you know, and we sort of felt that we could tell a relatively simple but powerful little story about two brothers, and set in ordinary people in an extraordinary situation. Always makes an interesting story. So with our limited resources, we thought this is something that we could possibly do. Obviously, we'd love to have a game with thousands of characters and millions of lines of text, but we have to sort of work within something that we can actually finish and produce realistically with our tiny little team. And so I think that's the nugget grew from post-apocalyptic Africa, and simple story set in that environment.
And interestingly, a lot of our story discussions when we first moved down to Cape Town, we took a lot of like long beach walks, because we're originally from Joburg, which there's no beaches in Joburg.
Joburg's a big industrial city.
There's not a ton of nature there. So when we finally got to Cape Town, we really took advantage of the fact that we could go down to the beach. And most of our beach walks was Nick, myself, and his little dog Chelsea. So we sort of developed the story of these two brothers and their pet dog, kind of like in this weird alternative African environment, and that became the story of Untold.
That's so cute. I love that. Your dog is Poochie. I love that.
Yeah.
It's actually called Pooch.
Pooch. Her nickname's Pooch.
That's the most authentic story ever then. You just need to go to the future now, and then you've done it all, so it's fine. So the juxtaposition of the beauty and ruin in the game was something that really stood out to me, is that, you know, you've got the ruins of, like, say, the big boat in the first area, but then you've got this beautiful lush greenery taking over those ruins, and the juxtaposition really stands out and creates a sense of wonder. And we spoke about kind of why Africa and why that inspired you, but I was wondering if there was anything specific from other media that kind of inspired the way you built the world and what you wanted to show in it.
One of the movies that's probably had one of the largest influences on my sort of view of the post-apocalyptic genre in the last couple of years is definitely Oblivion. I think that the world that they created in Oblivion is just it was something I'd never actually seen before. I'd never seen that sort of level of nature taking over the cities and that. So I definitely think that movie had a big influence on me. But also just in general, you know, I mean, Mad Max Fury Road is one of those movies that, like, you can't watch that movie and not be inspired to do something.
It's amazing.
The color, the set design, the music, just everything about that, just sort of like it draws you in so much. And then there's classic things, you know. The Boy and His Dog is an amazing. I mean, even there's influence of Little Shop of Horrors in the game. So it always becomes difficult to kind of pick one thing that is inspiring you to do it. You sort of you take bits and pieces from every bit of media that you actually contain. I mean, even just taking a walk down the road and we'll see something that's very, very cool. Take a drive somewhere, we'll sort of like see a weird thing, and then you'll kind of like take that and bring that into what you're actually putting together.
I love that. That actually is one of the things that I was going to bring up later on, but we might as well talk about it now, is the use of photogrammetry that you had and bringing real things into the game through that technology. Now, I wondered if you could kind of explain that to people, as if they don't know what photogrammetry is, what it is, and also why you decided to use it as opposed to drawing everything kind of your own way.
So photogrammetry is essentially it's a technology where you can 3D scan real world objects and turn them into 3D objects. So While some people actually do it with actual 3D scanners, there are ways to do it where you essentially take hundreds of photographs of an object from all different angles. You put that into a piece of software, and the software coordinates the points on the object and sees where they are in relation to another point, and then constructs the 3D object from those photographs. And I think for us using photogrammetry, it was sort of twofold. A big thing is that because we are a tiny team and we had a massive amount of work to produce, if you take something, a statue could take an artist 2 or 3 days to actually model, whereas I could essentially go and find a statue, photograph it, and have a full 3D model that is photorealistic in an hour or two.
That's
so
amazing.
From a production standpoint, it really it sped up our production massively. And I think also just having the thing of our game is set in Africa and actually having little pieces of the world around us, actually going on walks and finding rocks, finding tree stumps, finding seaweed, large, interesting sort of pieces of ground, actually photo scanning those in and bringing them into the game. Yeah.
Thank you very much, guys. And thank you for watching, everybody. Keep an eye on the channel because we've got loads more to do with Beautiful Desolation coming out in the next couple of weeks. And we look forward to sharing that with you. So we'll see you all very soon. Bye.
Yes, bye.
You have the glow of a wanderer. Wanderers can be kind, or they can be cruel. Which are you?